Hello and welcome to the budget verdict on ET Now. A safe but not sensational budget by the finance minister today. This was a perfect opportunity, but a volatile political scene seems to have had an impact on harder decision making by the FM. India Inc. so far has appeared disappointed. Taxes are up.
Will the divestment in 2G auction be enough to bail the government out? The fight is not just about fiscal deficit, but even credibility deficit. There was lip service on fiscal consolidation, but little idea of how the expenditure is going to be cut and revenues created. Is this a budget that's long on imagination but short on reform? Joining us now, the biggest voices in industry, Sanjay Nair, CEO and head of KKR India, Shikha Sharma, Chief of Axis Bank, Bobby Parekh, Managing Partner of BMR, Pawan Goenka of M&M, Venu Srinivasan of TVS Motors, and ET Now's consulting editor, Swaminathan Aiyar. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and Shikha, for joining us for this debate. Swami, I want to kick this off with you. First up, what's your verdict? This is probably the last opportunity before elections, the last opportunity to push reforms, and an opportunity missed?
Well, the way I put it was, the budget is like saying, Lord, give me fiscal discipline, but not yet. There are some very, very rosy figures in there which suggest you have to have deregulation of diesel, you have to have an increase in the price of fertilizer. But when Pranab Mukherjee is asked, when are you going to do this? He says, you see, I have to carry others along with me, so I can't do any deadline. But no, please remember, the fertilizer subsidy is adding 200 crores every day. Another 200 crores every day, oil subsidy. Another 200 crores every day, the food subsidy. So, if you keep putting it off, it makes a huge difference whether or not these changes are going to come about in April or in July or in October. The more it is delayed, the more this particular fiscal thing is going to go through the roof. So I said, there are good intentions, maybe. There's a statement that, it is desirable to put my house in order, and if I do all these things, the fiscal deficit will come down from 5.9 to 5.1. But for this, Mr. Mukherjee says, I have to carry people with me. Therefore, okay, the budget speech has been done, the finance minister has had his say, but I'm afraid Mamata Banerjee will have the last word.
Okay, so it's a political story out there that's worth playing out, but important that Swami is saying in his verdict, it's rosy on numbers and on intent. But what happens next, that's the big question. Shikha Sharma, what's your take on this budget? Have you been reasonably pleased with it? If on 10 you had to give it marks, where would you pick?
I think we've been for years saying that we don't want the budget to be a big event, and we want it to basically be a bookkeeping event. And we have to look at it in that context, that it's basically a balancing of the financing. I think the expectations of the market probably were haywire in expecting a big bang budget, and this is not it, but it is continuous. I think the two things that we wanted to see was some kind of fiscal consolidation, which the budget does talk about, and the second was a spur to investment and trying to do something around infrastructure. And I think there are a lot of steps around that which have been talked about. So I think it's a fair budget.
Sanjay Nair, the talk is about fiscal consolidation. A 4.6 target was badly missed. We landed up at 5.9%. They've now set a target of 5.1%. Would you take that seriously? Do you think
Absolutely. I think it's not a slippage. Anyone who uses the word slippage, I think is being extremely kind to the finance minister. A 4.6 to 5.9 is not a slippage, okay? It's a massive gap. There was a huge opportunity of being strategic about this because next year is going to be it's pretty close to elections. I think they missed a big opportunity. You've got to make a statement about expenditure, about revenues. This is the most benign kind of a budget, assuming there is some 7.5% growth. So automatically GDP comes to, the deficit down to 5.1%. This is, according to me, pretty much a 4 on 10 if you ask me, coming to the marks that you asked. And I'm worried about a few other things, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Yes, we will, because 4 out of 10 doesn't sound like a number that India Inc. should be pleased with. Pawan Goenka, everybody is talking about elections. There's a political flavor to every comment. Everyone wants to hedge their comments about the budget based on saying political compulsions. Is that what this budget is about? Fewer economic realities, more political situation?
Well, clearly, safe but not sensational is the right way to describe this budget. A few increase in subsidies here, a few increase in taxes there, come up with a number of 5.1%, and that's about it. I don't think anybody believes the 5.1% number as being realistic because there are some very major gaps in subsidies, fertilizers, petroleum products, and it's not clear how that number will be achieved. And if you look at the numbers of 7.6% GDP growth that has been projected and look at all the numbers and work through it, there's an assumption of 5% inflation in those numbers. And I do not know that whether 5% inflation is possible, and therefore whether 7.6% GDP growth is possible either. So to that extent, the budget leaves a little bit of uncomfortable feeling whether these numbers are really realistic or not.
Swami, I want to get you in here because Shikha here believes that the fiscal consolidation roadmap laid out by the finance minister seems somewhat credible. Pawan and Sanjay here don't necessarily agree with that. What's your own sense? As one of the top economists in this country, would you agree with the fact that the 5.1% target set by the government is very ambitious?
Well, you see, instead of asking me, if you just go back to the interview one did with Pranab Mukherjee is pointing out the uncertainties and saying it will happen only if I can carry other people with me. He says, I don't have a majority. He said, I don't have the numbers. So, I mean, forget whether or not Mr. Pawan Goenka has his doubts. It would appear that Mr. Pranab Mukherjee has his doubts. But it goes beyond that. I mean, we have, I think, so far talked only on the fiscal deficit. What you have to look at is the service tax, the one thing which he has increased very substantially. I went through the finance bill, through the list of 17 industries which are exempted and everything else to be exempted. Guess what? Broadcasting, sir, is not exempted. So henceforth you will have to pay tax even for this kind of broadcast. You will find that lawyers are not exempt. And that's a very powerful lobby. In the past they've held things up. Hospitals, health services, not exempt. So within the budget, I also see these series of time bombs. You know, Pranab Mukherjee finished it simply by saying, you know, there is a list of 17 industries in the finance bill. And, you know, he's waiting for somebody to look up that list. Well, I finally looked up that list. And believe me, there's some dynamite in there. So it's not just going to be Mamata Banerjee worrying about petrol. Mamata Banerjee is also going to be screaming about train fares. Because till now we thought, train passenger fares, there's going to be no service tax
on that.
But now they say, we exempt, but what is not exempted is first-class travel and AC travel. So even there, you're going to have a tax apparently on rail travel. So I said, there's these series of time bombs waiting out there, and I'm going to sit back and watch in the next 2-3 days.
Let's get a reaction to that,
watch
Swami.
all these different lobbies come.
To those time bombs, a reaction there coming in from Bobby Parikh. Some of the numbers that, Swami has looked into, he clearly feels that we're being unrealistic, not just about what we are going to deliver and in terms of what we're going to collect. What's your take based on the kind of tax sheet put out?
So I think, I don't know how they've done the math, but some of the tax provisions, so both on the direct tax side as well as the indirect tax side, have the potential to cause lots of pain. So the service tax stuff and the fact that the rate has been increased from 10% to 12% was something that was anticipated, or something that was a possibility.
Have we planned taxes enough in a way to raise money to deal with fiscal consolidation? That is the question at the end of the day.
See, the fiscal consolidation, one part of the equation is how much he's going to spend. The other part of the equation is what tax is going to generate for him, as far as tax revenues are concerned. And from everything that's been done in the income tax law, although he said that on the direct tax side, there's actually a net giveaway rather than an accretion. I'm not quite sure how where that's coming from, because I saw very little in the direct tax provisions which sort of work by way of a relief. There were lots of things which actually had a quite a significant sting in the way in which those provisions are constructed, and I think that there's lots of tax with lots of litigation accompanying it, which is likely to come through.
We'll come to the litigation piece in a bit, but Shikha, you're the only one here who seems to be liking the budget. I want to get you into what the RBI will do now, because for long the RBI has maintained that it will take a call on cutting rates once there's a credible fiscal consolidation roadmap. Do you see that, and do you think now there's a case for RBI to act?
So obviously I can't predict what RBI is going to do, but I think RBI has been for a while talking about the fact that they're going to look at both inflation and growth. And, while yes, fiscal consolidation is something they're focused on, I think we have to remember in the world of today, there are no easy textbook answers to how to manage through a difficult situation like this. And I don't think we can get dogmatic about saying that you have to control fiscal deficit, because you have to do counter-cyclical stuff. If you think that growth is going to suffer, then you do have to loosen your purses a little bit, and it's a phenomenon which is happening across the world. So I would expect RBI to take a balanced view of inflation and growth and accordingly decide what to do on rate cuts. So through the day I've been hearing people saying no rate cuts happening, But I'm not convinced about that.
Sanjana, what is that balanced view that Shikha is talking about? And will RBI really have the ability to take one? Because inflation, based on the numbers that we're seeing this budget is clearly inflationary at the moment if you go by what India Inc. is saying. So really that will make RBI stay back from cutting rates, one would imagine.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is again a budget with a lot of promise on numbers. So I don't think that RBI can lay a lot of confidence on the path to consolidation, even if it's 5.1 or whatever. The measures are not clear. I mean, they've made assumptions again, just like last year on this show we discussed. Everything has gone awry, and for nobody's fault. But you can't depend upon capital markets to take you out by 60,000 crores or whatever. And guess what? The capital markets are not there, so you're sitting with a massive shortage, and oil prices are much higher. So I don't think RBI can take much comfort from a clear, concerted path towards consolidation. So I don't see why they should be liberal. They've already been very, very liberal. I know people since the morning have been saying they've been so harsh with rates. And I tell you that I'm pretty confident. I've said it on this show many times before. Capital asset creation is not being held back because of a high cost of capital. It's because of other reasons. Those are not being addressed. So supply side economics don't get addressed. We keep going back to RBI and say, hey, cut the rates. That is not the answer to the solution. I mean, you've got to make the policy environment much better to create supply side. And as I keep coming back, we've got to come back and talk about we're actually externalizing the fiscal now, because we are now inviting dollars to come and fund infrastructure. I think that's a very, very tricky situation, but let's come to that later, because RBI has to also manage now external dollars coming in into infrastructure financing. And let's talk about that, because I want to make sure that that's something we talk about. I think we're all missing that since the morning.
Before we get to sectors, Bobby Parikh, on a signal to foreign institutional investors, the fact that the government has made changes to the Income Tax Act with retrospective effect so that cross-border deals like the Vodafone transaction could be taxed. This is, in a sense, unprecedented, though the finance minister would like us to believe that it's not. What is the signal that it's sending to foreign investors?
I think it's quite it's a very scary signal and a very avoidable signal to send. I think there was a little bit of goodwill created, or a feel-good created, not goodwill so much as a feel-good created by the Supreme Court decision on Vodafone, and it went through a fairly tortuous journey before it got there. And then we have this to follow, and to follow in the way in which it has, and it's quite amazing that in the budget, at least I saw 4 different sets of provisions which have a retrospective kind of effect. This one is the most significant for taxing transactions which involve an indirect transfer of an asset in India, and it's not just so while passing it off as a clarification. So the technicality in this is whether, you cannot make substantive law with retrospective effect. Right. So you cannot create a charge where a charge didn't exist by going back in time. I mean,
you think they cannot, but well, they have certainly made a big mention out there in the budget. Let's quickly get Swami's take as well. Swami, you were expecting this. And I remember in our pre-budget chats, this is one thing that you brought up, that surely there's going to be some recommendation about dealing with what has been a blow to the government over the Vodafone case. Now, you think that we expect another going back to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will shoot this down again?
Well, I'd simply say that, foreign institutional investors may have a higher opinion of Indian budget making than I do. But the fact is that again and again and again in my 40 years in reporting, I have seen the government enact things with retrospective effect. So since it has always done so, it comes as no surprise to me that it has done so again. And if Mr. Parikh says this is scary, well, everybody should be scared, because this is that kind of country. It is not a surprise to me, and I don't think it should be a surprise to others. It is one of the risks of investing in India. Having said that, I mean, there is this definite feeling that there is a huge amount of leakage going out, whether on transfer pricing or whether on this particular account. There are a large number of deals still in the offing, which will be affected by the Vodafone law. And if you club all those deals together, it will mean 10-20,000 crores revenue perhaps for the government of India. So it's the kind of thing the government is determined to go after. It's no surprise to me. The other thing you might have noted is they've also said when foreign assets are abroad, everybody has to report them. And now we are going to reopen cases up to 16 years. So till now we had a situation that when people said, all the black money is abroad, actually because you couldn't open reassessments beyond 8 years, most of that had become white. Suddenly, with a stroke of the pen, all that has become black again. because you can now go back for 16 years. So let us see what happens. You have a government desperate to do something about apparent leakages, desperate to do something on black money, and is going into this in a big way. It's worth also pointing out that, henceforth, whenever there is any transaction, you're buying or selling a flat or land, there is now going to be tax deducted at source, even when you register the sale of that property.
Now, comment on that. These are scary signals, aren't they? Swami, I want to get a quick comment from Sanjay Nair as well, who probably speaks to a lot of foreign institutional investors on a daily basis. Aren't these scary signals, the fact that you're going to chase down deals from a 16-year retrospective effect?
Yeah, I suppose they are, but I think the fine print on tax, I'm not an expert, so we'll let people like Bobby figure it out. I think the bigger issue is that you should not confuse FIIs, who I think today are primarily playing the Indian market from an arbitrage point of view, and they're mostly short money. Long money is still very, very attractive to India for the secular story.
But this will give them a bit of a scare.
Sure, it will. But I think the secular story is still intact, so don't misunderstand that. The real issue is just the way consumption is domestic. I think we could utilize a lot of the local savings into the real sector.
And that's for the private equity man that you are right now.
No, but not about that. The fact is that there is so much of local savings which don't get channelized because you have a huge fiscal burden that keeps mopping it up. I keep coming back to the point. The gap is going to be funded by dollars, and I just don't like it. But we'll come back to that later. I hope we will. But so what I don't like is that the domestic consumption is intact. The domestic savings are growing and pretty healthy. But there's a very big borrower sitting on your back who mops it up. And again, if you look at the new borrowing numbers, I think as much as 90% plus will be mopped up, which in a way is a mitigant because, not borrowing dollars for fiscal is good. Borrowing rupees is better. But what does it leave for the real sector?
So, okay, so there was one big sort of blow that came through Vodafone and one big saving rates. I think the fact that there was no tax on diesel cars and, of course, no fuel reform, that saved the day for the auto companies.
Absolutely. For auto industry, that was a big relief. There was almost a scare that a bombshell will drop on us, and that would have been very bad for the industry. But more than it not happening, what I'm very pleased about is the process that got used here. There was tremendous pressure on the ministry to do this, and there was emotional argument for it and database argument against it, and I'm glad the database argument prevailed. So I'm happy about that process.
But what about the roadmap for diesel decontrol? You got the sense that the government wants to do something on that front. Both the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister in the interview with Swami indicated that that's something that they're seriously looking at. They've also brought down the fuel subsidy target this year, significantly indicating that that's something that could happen. How do you see that impacting the auto sector?
I think the industry has always been very clear that the diesel prices cannot be subsidized the way they are being subsidized, and they should be market-based. If the government does what came out in the economic survey, which is to fix a subsidy level and then let it flow with the market prices, I think that's a very good thing to do. It could have a small impact on growth, but I think that's reality, and we have to face the reality. So we will support from the industry anything that's done to deregulate the diesel prices.
Shikhar, just to bring you in on now the whole ECB issue that Sanjay was talking about earlier, we've got aviation, power, all of them getting some sort of a leeway to go and borrow from foreign lenders. But really, will that be a good solution, and what does this really mean for the banking system at large?
I actually disagree with Sanjay in that I think India's got a huge shortage of infrastructure. We need to fund this, and domestic savings are going to be able to fund it only up to a point. So I do think India needs that foreign capital to be able to fund the infrastructure. And we can argue whether debt is the right route or equity is the right route, but I think we'll have to use a combination. So I think it's a positive step to allow ECB in infrastructure, and it'll free up savings to go into other segments as well. So,
Sanjay, you want to comment on that?
No. She was free of the savings to go to the fiscal account, sure.
No, I may not want it to happen, but I think you have to remember, if there is a fiscal deficit and there's a pool of savings,
sure,
you don't want infrastructure not happening because money is not available.
Look, this is all a relative discussion. I mean, it's all relative. The fact of the matter is, there's a lot of savings. You have a big borrower. He takes the savings first with some crazy rates, and what you're left with is you've got to build infrastructure, as Shikhar said, and banks don't have the capital. So you invite ECBs and foreign equity capital. That's not the solution to rupee-generating road assets. I mean, let's face it.
You want to comment on that? Look, Shikhar and Sanjay are disagreeing out there about the whole ECB boosts that the FM might have included in this budget. Good idea or bad?
Well, I'd simply say this. It's one thing to say you can go ahead and borrow ECBs, but the foreigner might say, do you think I'm crazy to lend to you? You really think the foreigners are going to lend to Kingfisher? You really think the foreigners are going to lend to even Jet Airways in these circumstances?
Malia gave the budget a
everybody
thumbs
can
up.
see what's happening, that here are these companies who can't even reach financial closure because they don't have a fuel linkage, they don't have an automatic provision for a tariff revision, and you're going to say, okay, you guys, you go out and borrow. I mean, I think foreign lenders realize after the financial crisis they have to be much more careful. There are all kinds of risks in lending to emerging markets, especially lending to these kinds of sectors in India. I think all the guys who burnt their fingers subscribing an equity to Reliance Power would also have to think about even equity investment out here. Look, some of these sectors out here are dead scary even for me. I don't think foreigners are going to rush in. So I simply say that we need to get our act together, as Sanjay said, on the supply side. Do we really know what you're going to do about supplies of coal, about supplies of gas? Do we know what we're going to do about an automatic pass-on of higher import prices in case we have to import gas and coal? If we haven't got our act together on all those, why just say the problems are going to be solved by borrowing in ECBs? That is not, cannot be the solution.